G'day everyone. Welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory, joined by my co-host Joe Pearson, as always, and today we'll be going over perhaps the last meeting of Rodgers versus Belichick and looking ahead to the Packers' very first London game. But let's start by catching up on what's happened around the NFC. Joe, how do you feel about the rest of the conference?
There's been a lot of surprising, uh, scores in games lately. Teams that were supposed to be good and are kind of not so good, and teams that aren't supposed to be good that are being good. A full rundown of things. Like I said, it's interesting games each and every week so far. And I know we're just at the beginning of the season. I think we're just over a quarter of the season.
Yep, quarter of the season, 17 games, so it's pretty hard to get an even split now.
Right. So everybody should be starting to come into their own, but it's still kind of wacky, especially the way the Packers have been playing lately.
Yeah, I always feel like you never really know who the teams are until at least week 8, maybe week 10 even. This is kind of a period where teams are still just figuring out what their problems are and kind of starting to address those. But it's still quite young in the season. But even with that being said, I feel like we have kind of already gotten a good idea of what the shape of the NFC is. It's not exactly the bloodbath maybe that some of the fans were hoping for. It's more of a water bath. It's just like a bit
Yeah.
of a sea of
Yeah.
mediocrity, kind of. And at the very top, as we've covered the past 3 weeks, it's been the Eagles. Sitting pretty comfortably at the top there. They're the only undefeated team left in the NFC, and they're a team that kind of continues to impress me. In when you look back to that first week, the 49ers versus the Bears game in the rain, and you see how both those teams kind of just they just tried their best to navigate their way through the rain, and there's not really a whole lot you can do in that environment. But it seemed like this game with the Eagles, they almost like had a plan of how they were going to play in the rain. And there's some things that you can't control. Like it's objectively always going to be very difficult to hold and throw the ball in the rain. But this the way like this the style that they played, and obviously leaning more towards the ground game and doing that successfully. It's kind of an obvious thing to do, but not every team does it, and they looked pretty decent in the rain, and that's not always an easy thing to do.
Well, and it's really weird because, like I said, everything's kind of flip flop. Um, I mean, just look at the team the Eagles were playing, the Jaguars. The Jaguars were in the game, 29-21. Who would ever thought the lowly Jaguars who had a shitty ass season last year would be 2-2 right now and be in games, and
Yeah,
it's just amazing. And I mean, looking at standings, like you said, the Eagles are the only team in the NFC still undefeated. But you look at the NFC West, who's usually a power conference, and all of them are 2-2 right now. Or you look at our division, the NFC North. The Vikings and the Packers are tied 3-1, and if we were to end the season today, the Vikings would have basically the tiebreaker because they have the win over the Packers. And then the NFC South is floundering big time.
yeah.
Even Brady and the Buccaneers are sitting 2-2. So the NFC is really the NFC East for however many years has been like the the trash bin of the NFC. Now they're like the gold standard. Eagles 4-0. The Cowboys, who I didn't think would be doing anything with Cooper Rush, sitting at 3-1. The
Yeah.
Giants sitting at 3-1. I mean, you still got the Commanders 1-3, but those top three teams are blowing it out of the water.
Yeah, and it's still very early to say, but I've heard a lot of other analysts say this as well. I think I really believe we're almost on the cusp of another offensive revolution or wave in the NFL. And one of the biggest storylines that I've kind of noticed this season is that defense is on the up and offense is kind of on the down a little bit. This is it's everything in the NFL is cyclical scheme wise, and we're kind of at that point where in previous years defenses have gotten lighter and quicker, and more agile to adapt to like the trickery and the RPOs and the deep passing games. And now we see kind of the defenses really coming into more that two high shell kind of thing and focusing a lot on that kind of secure, put a lid on defense. And you see teams are like starting to kind of take advantage of that, and the running game has become much more of a necessity. You see, like the teams this year, especially that have become the dominant offenses, they're relying a lot more on explosive run plays than in years past, and I think it's something really awesome. I love that kind of old school football, smash mouth football, just ram it down their throat, and it's one of the best ways to take advantage of these defenders. You have some linebackers now who only playing like 220, 230, 240, and 10 years ago basically unheard of. So I think it's really fun to watch, and it's going to be interesting to see if that trend maintains the rest of the year or if it starts to kind of go back to how it was the past 2 3 years.
Well, just take a look at some of the coaches. They're, the coaching trees. Back in the 90s, it was Bill Walsh's coaching tree that was going everywhere with the West Coast offense. Well, now the Shanahan coaching tree is taken over, and Shanahan was always the smash mouth, run the football type. So it is everything kind of flips flops. I have a feeling in the next dozen years or whatever that it'll go back to a pass heavy league, because look at some of the guys that are coming out of college, and they're nothing but throwers, and it just it'll happen. But yeah, it's just strange how things are working right now.
And I think the strangest thing that nobody really predicted at all is our own hometown Lions somehow becoming the number one scoring offense through the first 4 weeks of the season. I think this
No
game the
kidding,
past
right?
week was that I believe I read it was the third highest scoring game of all time, which is just I mean, who would have thought? Honestly, Seahawks, Lions, noted offensive powerhouses going at it.
Well, and that's what's been strange is even though the Lions haven't been winning games, they've still been in games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I hate keeping sounding like a broken record, but everything's kind of flip flop. Bears only scoring 12 points in a game,
Yep.
Lions scoring 45 points in a game. Who would have thought about this stuff? Or you again go back to the standings and look at the AFC. Who would have thought the Dolphins and the Bills were going to be tied for the lead in the AFC East? Again, that's
Yep.
not the Dolphins. The Dolphins. I mean, when was the last time the Dolphins were a relevant team?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question.
Or the
Um,
Dolphins and the Bills having the same record as the Chiefs?
yeah, yeah. I thought the Dolphins were going to be a lot better this season, but not this good. I didn't expect things to click this quickly. It's a little bit terrifying.
It is. I kind of worry about it knowing that our own beloved quarterback is on the downhill of his career. I mean, we
Mhm.
all hope he has like a Brady like career where he can play till 44 or 45 or 50 or 70 or whatever Brady's planning to play to. But, it just to see how things are flipping, it scares me a little bit knowing that here next couple years Rodgers is going to be done and we're going to be looking on the outs from the outside.
Yeah, with Brady, no wife, no limits. He's probably going to play for another 5 years now. So,
Yeah, who knows? I really
um,
don't. He just keeps sucking the souls out of young people to continue playing.
yeah, it seems a bit like that, doesn't it? Well, bringing it back to the Packers versus Tom Brady's old team, Packers versus Patriots. Not the game I think that anyone was expecting or hoping for. Um,
But I called it,
look,
didn't I? I called it.
yeah, you certainly did. You certainly did. The vaunted Bailey Zappi revenge game. Who would have thought? He's definitely not what I
Well,
wanted to see on my TV.
he at least did it in a different way than I thought was going to happen. I figured he'd run around all over the field, but he stayed in the pocket and was delivering passes. Now, his stats weren't great. I mean, his numbers, but he put together a hell of a game, at least enough to make it too close for comfort.
Yeah, I'm really, I haven't really gone into all 22 at all. It's like just purely based on the TV copy. It kind of seems like they weren't expecting him to make a lot of these throws, or perhaps they just kind of really like underestimated him and allowed a lot of these soft zones to be kind of manipulated and taken advantage of. And it's just so bewildering to watch. And kind of like what we both talked about last week, the Packers have like a real tendency to play down to these teams. And my God, it's so frustrating.
Well, and I mean, looking at his stats, like I said, they're not like world breaking, but 10 of 15 for 99 yards with one touchdown.
Hmm.
I mean, nobody should be even close to winning a game with that kind of stats. And the Packers held the Patriots to three offensive points in the first half.
Hmm.
The only touchdown that they scored was a stupid throw by Rodgers to get a pick six. But you know, early on, it didn't look like they were going to do anything. But what helped them was the run game. They were just smashing the ball down the Packers' throats, and it was opening
Yeah.
up the play action pass.
Yeah. And I kind of want to go quickly over this run defense that we've kind of had trouble with this season so far. And the funny thing is that we're actually for a lot of the crap that Joe Barry gets for playing in with like lighter personnel and things like that, he's actually played base quite a lot this year, and with Campbell and Walker on the field at the same time, he has kind of acknowledged that he needs to put larger bodies into stopping the run. And yeah, we still get these games where teams just, yeah, as you said, just running all over us. Like even just through the first 4 weeks of the season, the Packers' run defense ranked 22nd in the league and giving up 5 yards per carry. And then I think a lot of it comes down to the linebacker play, and obviously the D line getting manhandled, Larry reverting to his who he thought he was all along. Jaron
Did
Reed
your
not really doing a
Aussiness
whole
just
lot.
call him Larry?
Lowry.
I
um,
love it.
yeah, him kind of becoming that shell of who we all really knew that he was at the end of the day, and Kenny having a slightly off game. So many times you see the running game, whether they're kind of flowing all to one side or running a screen, and these linebackers just get lost in the mix, or Devondre is like a half step behind and he just barely misses the tackle, or Quay Walker is just off with the fairies in the middle of the line of scrimmage while the running back's out by the hash. It's just incredibly frustrating, and a lot of it. Yes, coaching is a massive part of it. Like they need to know where they are in the spots, but again, like to a certain degree, once you have like the play, if your players just aren't executing like in the way that they weren't in this game, it's a tough spot for any coordinator to be in.
It is, and you. I hate to keep beating a dead horse with this, but it comes down to no leadership. You could tell that defense was just lost. Uh, Two is the fact that they just looked lost. It seems like the communication is gone. Now, granted, Adrian Amos went out early with a concussion, and they were playing Rudy Ford in for him. But I mean, that doesn't excuse the rest of the defense. I've heard some people talk about how Stokes hasn't really been looking that great. I do have to say I think Razul needs to stay away from being a slot corner. He played pretty well as the
Mm-hmm.
perimeter guy, but he's not doing well as a slot. So with Jair out, we've learned that we need to keep Razul in as just the perimeter guy. So I don't know if that means you want to
Absolutely.
move Stokes in at the slot corner or have Jair in at slot corner,
Yeah.
but I think Razul needs to stay away from it. But it just communication and talking about Kenny Clark, you know, he had that one unnecessary roughness call, and I think it was due to a lot of frustration. They couldn't get the penetration that they wanted to get, the Patriots were pretty much manhandling him, and it drove him to do what he did. So it and speaking of Devondre, he's even having a down year this year with the missed tackles. I think the stat was
Yeah,
that he had 4 missed tackles all year last year, and now he's up to 6 alone just
yeah,
within the first 4 weeks.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, something's got to happen. Either we've got to bring in a motivational guy to sit there and pump these guys up every week, or the coaches really need to step up. And I know I talked about that a little bit last week, where the coaches seemed deflated anymore. It seemed like when they start, like I said last week with Matt LaFleur, when he started, he seemed to be the hard nosed, loudmouth, you know, get on their asses type guy. Joe Barry was the same way. I remember reports on the first practices he had where he was jumping up and down and screaming and yelling and
Yeah.
celebrating when the defense did something or getting on their asses when they did something wrong. So I don't know what's changed, but something's got to break.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll say about the defense is just as much as I kind of make excuses for Joe Barry as often as I do, um, I think a good defensive coordinator should get more out of the defense than the sum of its parts. And we see that with even Dan Quinn, with our homeboy Mike McCarthy in Dallas. That defense is not necessarily as star studded as what we have in Green Bay. And on paper, everyone said it the whole offseason. Green Bay should have a top five, top three defense purely based on the talent that we have. And it just seems like the guys don't really play as well as a team as they should be and as they have the potential to. I have faith that these guys are going to heat up as the season goes along. I think that's kind of what happened last season, as like that last kind of third, the last half stretch of the season when they really got moving. And think back to like the games against the big players, like even the Rams that first half. I think they kind of started to figure out exactly where they like who they are. I'm just not seeing that yet.
Right. And I just, something's, like I said, something's got to break. Somebody's got to step up and do something. So having a lot of youth on the team is a blessing and a curse. It's great
Yeah,
because, if they hit, you're going to have a long career. But then again, you don't have that vet to step in and say, all right, guys, this is what we need to do. We need to, for the lack of a better term, bear down and uh,
ugh.
really get at it. But, you know, yeah, something's gotta give. Somebody's got to step up and do something, and do it more than just on the field. It needs to be all over. It needs to be in the locker room. It needs to be at practice. It needs to be on during the game. It just needs somebody needs to step up and do something on both sides. Somebody needs to do it for the offense. Somebody needs to do it for the defense because this offense is basically only a half a game worth of offense.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, what a half of offense it was that second half. Look, I don't want to flex on my predictions earlier in the season, but I'm a big Watson believer. Put down a little cheeky bet on the Watson scoring a touchdown, 1 to 7.5 odds. Cash that in all the way to the bank. Beautiful touchdowns from both Watson and Dobbs. Finally getting these guys some like real involvement in the offense. And I think the best part is you could even do a little bit more.
But yeah, that's only like Aussie dollar, right? So that's only worth what, $5 here, and it's $5 American to $1 Aussie. So how much really did you make?
I'll take it where I can get it.
But yeah, Watts that end around was ran perfectly.
Oh, yes.
Dobbs was really looking great. I guess we do need to kind of bring up, was it a catch or was it not a catch? I'm going
Mm.
to let you answer because I want to see how you answer, and then we'll go from there.
Look, if it's such a tough one because watching it back, I think it kind of depends on your definition of a football move.
Now we
His,
don't need
his
semantics. Was it a catch or was it not a catch?
Look, if I was the ref and looking objectively, I would have to say it's not a catch. The way he drops it and it hits the ground and he bobbles it on the way down, even with the rule changing and being a bit more lenient, I gotta say, not a secure catch.
Now that surprises me. I figured you were gonna be one of those that would sit there and argue that it was a catch. It should have stayed as a
Mm-mm.
catch. He made a football move. The ground can't cause a fumble and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of surprised me on that one. But I do agree. I don't think it was a catch either. It wouldn't have broke my heart any if they did call it a catch.
Yeah.
Obviously it would have made it a lot different game. But I have something to say to, and it might piss a lot of people off, but hell, we probably don't even have that many listeners at this point anyway. So the one or two of you that are actually listening, it might piss you guys off. If you pound the table that Dez didn't catch it, then Romeo didn't catch it because it was the exact. If
Yep.
anything, the Dez one had more of a chance of being called a catch than the
Yep.
Romeo one. He maintained possession until he hit the ground, and as soon as he hit the ground, the ball came out. And it came out more than just a bobble, it came out completely. So,
Yep.
as much as I would have not complained any had the refs called it a touchdown, it was not a catch. It was an incomplete. Now, I do have to say I'm kind of torn on the whole using a challenge to
Yeah.
look at it. I When I first heard everything going on, because I wasn't really I couldn't watch the game, that part of the game. I was listening to Wayne Larrivee and Larry McCarron on the radio broadcast, which I love those guys. So, it doesn't break my heart any to listen to them. But I didn't have a visual on what was happening, but the way they were talking about it is like, LaFleur better challenge this. LaFleur better challenge this, because the way they're talking about it, it's a touchdown. It's a touchdown, and we need the points. Just call it a touchdown. But then going back and watching it and seeing it, it's like, oh man, now he wasted a challenge. He lost a well, it wasn't really a wasted challenge because he was going to lose the challenge anyway, because it was at like 2 minutes and 1 second. So anything after 2 minutes would have been a booth review anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that timeout that was wasted. So I was kind of torn on the whole idea of whether he should challenge it or not. But after hindsight's 20/20 after the fact, it kind of bad that he wasted that timeout.
Yeah. And look, I'm glad that you said the thing about the Des catch because I was going to make the exact same point.
Oh, it's
um,
when I've been mentioning it to other people, it's been making them mad because one, they know it's true, and
yeah.
two, like I said, had the refs called it a touchdown, everybody would have accepted it. They wouldn't have
Mhm.
batted an eye at it.
I mean, I think the only point that I can make is if they gave little old Bailey Zappi all those delay of game penalties for free, wouldn't have hurt them to give us the little touchdown for free as well.
Yeah, that's another thing we should get on the soapbox about, because that's ridiculous. They had they did call the one delay game, which was amazing, but to have them give them an open play, because that cost us a touchdown. That cost the Packers a touchdown. Now
Yeah.
we don't know what would have happened if they would have called the delay of game, but at that point, them not calling that delay of game, even though the defense, I think it was Jacob Westerndorf and I kind of had a back and forth on Twitter. Maybe it was me and somebody else, or maybe it was I said something and then I saw a response that he made to somebody else. But he said, play or not, you know, call or not, the defense still shit the bed on that play, which I agree with. But had they called the penalty like it should have been called, the defense, it wouldn't have mattered whether or not the defense was in the right position or not.
Yeah.
Because they would have been pushed back. What is a delay game? It's a 10-yard penalty.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
were already pushed back. They were already pushed back 10 yards. So that would have been an extra 20 yards on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have made it even harder for them to get a first down or the touchdown.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't like the whole, well, call or no call, they should have, defense was in a poor position. It doesn't matter. If the call was made, we wouldn't have had that issue.
Yeah,
Rant
yeah,
over.
yeah. I totally agree. Um, yeah, I think like covering the last of like the bright spots for the guys on this team. I think that again, early days, 4 weeks into the season, I think that Rashawn Gary is making a really, really good case for Defensive Player of the Year. And if we see around the league who the other contenders are, you have Micah Parsons at the very top, Miles Garrett, he's out with that injury from the car crash. TJ
Yeah,
Watt,
and we don't know how long he's going to be out. And TJ,
exactly,
yeah, he's
he's
out.
with the bicep. Um, and
Peck. It's a peck, isn't it? Not a
Peck,
bicep.
right, Peck. Um, and yeah, really, it's kind of like Micah Parsons versus Rashawn Gary, the way I see it at the moment. And
I think you could throw in probably which one is it that's on the 49ers? Nick Bosa?
yeah,
You could probably throw him in there because I think he's actually, after last night's game, he leads the league with sacks.
yeah.
So, I
I
mean, you
mean,
could probably throw him in that conversation.
for sure, he's these premier edge rushing guys are always going to be at the very top there. Like, in my opinion, Micah Parsons is already 1A to 1B with Aaron Donald for the best defensive player in the NFL. But with these awards, a lot of the times it can go just purely based on stat lines and whatever injuries might happen throughout the season. And the fact that Rashawn Gary is even in that conversation is just like so amazing. And yeah, it's a conversation that I've gotten involved with on Twitter on my side. The whole like Quay Walker versus Devin Lloyd pick, it really gives me a lot of the same energy as Brian Burns versus Rashawn Gary pick 2019. And hopefully Quay goes through the same career progression as Rashawn has. But it does feel really nice to have a guy that was like pretty basically dragged through the mud as a rookie, just kind of get to show out and properly assert himself in the league, and people just constantly talking about him. It's really, really nice, and I'm so happy for him because he's such a hardworking guy.
Yeah, I think the only difference is Quay actually produced in college, whereas Rashawn didn't have the production in college. Uh, I would like to take a moment to say, Rashawn, I'm sorry, because I was one of those that was really against the pick, and not because it wasn't you were this horrible player and whatever. I just because you didn't have you came into Michigan as a 5-star recruit,
Number one in the
and
country.
yeah, and you had all the potential in the world, but you never put the potential together in college in production wise. I mean, if I would go back and watch film, I could probably sit there and pick and say, yeah, okay, he shows it here, he shows it there, but he didn't get the sack or he didn't get the tackle or whatever. And then when it came time for going through the draft, it was the same way. He's showing tons of potential. He's scoring off the charts when it comes to the combine, pro days, everything like that. But my whole problem is do you spend, what was the pick, number 12?
Number 12.
Do you spend the 12th pick overall for potential when your team doesn't usually pick this high in a draft? Do you go for the more sure shot or do you go well, I shouldn't say sure shot because the NFL draft is always going to be a crapshoot no matter what. But, there were some guys that looked more like they were going to be NFL players than maybe Rashawn did. So do you go for that or do you go more for the potential? The Packers put the potential and now it's working out for them. So I do. I know there's audio out there somewhere that has me ranting on the Rashawn Gary pick. So Rashawn, if you ever do hear this, I do apologize for anything negative I said about you. Don't
And
hurt me.
look, as someone who lives in Australia and it's quite expensive to get a
You don't
jersey,
have to worry about him hurting you.
I think I honestly think that Rashawn Gary is going to be my first jersey. So we'll see. If he gets that extension, straight to the Packers Pro Shop.
No doubt, no doubt.
um,
But yeah, I agree on everything. He right now, the way things are going, he has a strong case for Defensive Player of the Year.
mhm.
So let's see how things work out. Because like we keep saying, it still is early on in the season.
Yeah. And now moving on to next week, Packers versus Giants in London, in Britain. What
Well,
are your
that's
opening
like
thoughts
your
on this?
are the British are more closer related to you than they are us, aren't they?
I mean, it's basically the same thing if you think about it, really.
Because
But I think
we don't have the crazy accents that are similar to the British, whereas you
I,
guys have, you know, where they're not like spot on, they're like similar.
I think the main
But I don't
difference is
know.
that
I've never had anybody outside of the U.S. tell us that we have weird American accents. So
oh, I mean, I tell you right now, everyone else around the world constantly rags on Americans for the way that they talk. So feel
well,
assured
I'm
in
sure
that.
I'm sure they rag on us for a lot of things, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Um, look, this game in London, uh, it's I find it so funny for the Packers that it's taken them this long to get to an overseas game. It makes total sense. Like, don't get me wrong. If I was the Packers, if I was any football team, especially a team like Green Bay that operates in such like a small town and they're so integral to that economy, I totally understand why they would not want to touch an international game. But it's just funny that it took them so long to get here, and that literally every other team in the league has played an overseas game before them.
Well, it's funny that you say that, it's integral for Green Bay to have the Packers play in Green Bay. But it's also funny that no other team wants to take the Packers over to London because it hurts their ticket sales too, because they know the Packers are the most well-traveled fan base in the league. So no matter where they go, they're going to fill the stands. So that's why so many teams have not wanted to go over to London to play the Packers, because they also lose out on the ticket revenue and the
Yeah.
concession revenues and stuff like that. I've never been against the Packers going to London. I was never going to be a fan of it, and I know this is going to rankle some of the uh, British people out there, but I don't want to wake my ass up at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to be watching a football game. I love the Packers. I love football, but that's too damn early for me to be getting up to watch a game. And matter of fact, and I know you guys, like you, Nick, you have to change your schedule all the way around to be able to watch a game being in Australia. And I know the people over in the UK have to completely flip their schedule around to
Yeah.
watch a game, but that's too much damn work for me to do. Now, I
I mean,
do
look.
have to say that I probably will not be able to watch this game live. I'll have to catch it on
Mhm.
replay just because of work schedules and stuff like that. So I tip my hat to everybody who will be getting up that early. I give a salute to anybody who's traveling over to London to be watching the game in person. I, you know, what other kind of catchphrase could or I tip my glass or raise my glass to the Londoners that are actually going to be able to watch a game in person. Enjoy it, be loud. I also saw something weird that, or not weird, but shocking, that the 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 sports shop over at the stadium are selling cheese heads, the foam cheese heads, for $70 US, and that just boggles my mind that they're that
Jesus.
much money. Yeah,
How much do
I
they
can't
cost
remember
when
what.
you're in Green Bay?
I have never bought one, but it, uh, but I know it's nowhere near $70 to buy a cheesehead. I mean, I
Bloody hope
suppose
not.
I could do a real quick uh, pro shop visit. Just go to my favorites and type in or click on the pro shop, because I'm usually always uh, there. But I I would say maybe at most $30.
Yeah.
which still is kind of high for a foam hat,
Yeah,
but
but
it's nowhere near 70.
yeah, I mean, yeah, if you think about like kind of at concerts and things like that, they charge like here they can charge almost like $100 for a shirt at some of these concerts, which is like so ridiculous. But
Okay, I was
back
even
to
high.
the
According to the Packer Pro Shop, it is 24.99 for a foam cheesehead.
oh, beautiful, not even an issue.
That's what that would make it almost 3 times as much over in London for one of the same things.
So ridiculous.
All right, go ahead. I
Anything for
know
the
you want to
faithful.
keep going. I
Getting back
just
to
love it because I mean, if I had the money and I had the means, I'd probably go over there for the game.
oh yeah, I think it'll be an amazing game, and for like soccer crowds, football crowds in Europe, insane, absolutely insane. But
That's what I'm going to
getting
miss about not watching the game live because I would love to hear the football chants that the
yeah,
fans would do.
um, moving on to the actual football part of the podcast. um, the, the Giants are such a funny team to me because they are such a one of the most prestigious teams really in the league. They've been around for a long time in one of the most popular and biggest cities in the country. Yeah, they've been like pretty dog shit for the past like and on and off, on and off. They won 2 rings, fair enough. I'll give that to them. But this past decade and kind of they've had spurts where they've been not the best in modern NFL history, post 2000s. And they've kind of been in this funk ever since the last Eli Manning years, drafting Daniel Jones, who I kind of actually liked, to be honest, coming out, but hasn't really been the best. And they've kind of churned through a few different really mediocre head coaches and one psycho and Joe Judge, and now they've kind of with the hiring of Brian Daboll, it's things are actually really looking up for them. It seems like the players have really bought into this, and it's almost kind of similar to the Lions mentality of there's like high energy, high intensity. They want to run the ball. They want to kind of embrace that physicality of the game, and I love watching that style of football. It's so entertaining, and it really shows in their stat lines. You open the box score after the game's done. Saquon Barkley's gone off, and you see this past week, 81 passing yards, 262 rushing. Literally, basically any other game, those two stats would be swapped, and these guys are just basically given up on the passing game. Old mate Kenny Golladay is also given up on the passing game, and
Well, to be kind of fair, I know you can't be too fair because, like you said, the Giants really haven't been great. But as you touched on a little bit, they haven't had the greatest coaches there for the last few years.
yeah,
The management hasn't been great. But to be fair to them, this past game, they did get the win,
hmm
but they lost their starter to an ankle injury. Their
yep,
backup and Tyrod Taylor comes in and gets concussion. So then they had to trot their injured starting quarterback back out there and run the game out of the Wildcat, so he's not actually doing anything. So Saquon Barkley is taking the snaps in the quarterback position. So to be fair, yeah, they didn't pass the ball for nothing last week, and they haven't really had the need to pass the ball because Saquon has really went off again. He's looking like he was his rookie
yeah,
year. But I
finally,
think that goes back to what we were talking about early on in the conversation, that things in the NFL have started to shift from a pass heavy offense to a run heavy offense.
hmm
So, it kind of worry it, here we go again with my worries. Um who's going to play quarterback is one,
yeah.
and two, with as crappy as our run defense has been, is Saquon going to hit 300 yards in a game?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, thankfully for us, not thankfully for him, with the Daniel Jones ankle sprain, he has actually been one of the very best rushing quarterbacks in his time in New York, which is really funny to say. Um, he has been quite efficient, and he consistently rushes to 50 plus yards because he's not probably that great of a passer, but and that is historically something Green Bay has always had trouble with the past 15 years, even further than that. Like it's it's kind of a little bit of a blessing that he's injured and he's not going to be able to run all over us if he is starting. That is, but Saquon is really the big one here, and in my opinion, I think when Green Bay kind of zeroes in on a running back. We've seen it with obviously different defensive coordinator, but we see with like even Leonard Fournette, with Derrick Henry when they played that game against the Titans in the snow. Like when they kind of identify these star running backs, a lot of the times they don't run for all that much. But what I'm scared of is a mixture of how they're going to use Saquon around the field, catching the ball as well. I feel like he's probably not going to hit like a full 100 yards rushing, but combined yards all day, probably, yeah, I have a hard time seeing him being stopped effectively by this defense.
Well, that's kind of interesting to say because Saquon is definitely the star. There's no doubt about that. But they also have the Packer killer behind him, I believe. I believe his backup is Raheem Mostert.
Oh god, I
And
didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh no.
yeah.
Oh no.
Um, so, and I could be completely wrong without looking at it, but I'm pretty sure that Mostert is the backup in uh for the
No,
Giants.
Matt Breida, another 49ers running back.
Breida, yeah, okay. Um, okay, I was completely wrong on that, but it was still a 49. And I think Breida even ran all over the Packers. I think that was
He's
the
still definitely very
49ers
good.
game. What was it? The 49ers game the year the Packers fired McCarthy. I think Breida ran all over him. So still, Breida's nothing to shake a stick at. He's still going to be
Yeah,
a
he's a good
tough
backup. Yeah.
guy to uh, go with. So I really do. I don't know if it's something as simple as maybe putting uh putting Slayton or uh uh oh, who's the other, Jaron Reed or somebody like that, and just stick them in the middle and say, all right, you're our nose guard,
Yeah.
and then let Kenny and a rotation of Devontae Wyatt and Lowry and whoever else on the other side, let them rush from the in position or the three tech or whatever fancy term people are calling it nowadays. Let them rush from that area and play the run like that, or bring in a fourth guy every so often, or put Preston's hand in the dirt or put Rashawn's hand in the dirt and let them be the fourth guy. I don't know what it is they've got to do, but I really do see Saquon being the guy that is going to just decimate this defense if they don't do
Yeah, I
something
think
different than they've already been doing.
I mean, as we covered already, the rushing defense for the Packers has not been ideal by any stretch of the word. Um, I think, yeah, like this is really where the game is going to be decided. That's like where the only chance the Giants really have to operate against this defense is going to be with the running game. And I think, honestly, on the flip side, I think this is a really good opportunity for the Packers to get their own running game kind of properly established. And I know Jones did go for over 100 last week, but it still seemed like he could have been doing even more, 16 touches on the ground. And that's not very many for someone who could be really like the offense. He could be like basically the way the Panthers used Christian McCaffrey 2 years ago. They could really star him in that role. And maybe not necessarily every single game, but I think taking advantage of that, and kind of, obviously you still want Rodgers to build that rapport with the receivers and keep you know not throwing 500 balls behind the line of scrimmage every single game. But I really want to see more consistency from this run game and continuing to build on that success that they already have.
I I agree, but I understand where LaFleur is coming from, because he's got two really good running backs that both need snaps, and I understand that's why they're doing the two back set. I think, what was it, Tony Romo was calling it, the pony package.
Yeah, pony 21 package.
I understand what they're needing to do, and I agree that Aaron Jones needs to be involved a little bit more, but that takes away from AJ a little bit, or that takes away from Rodgers throwing it down the field, or like you said, throwing it behind the line of scrimmage 100 times a game. So it's really hard when you've got these solid players at these different, at the same position. It was kind of like how the Packers did years ago with all the wide receivers they had in the room. Jordy and Randall and Devontae and James Jones or Greg Jennings, and you had to spread the ball to make it even for to get everybody involved in the offense. So it is really a catch 22 on it. But I mean, you were talking about how the Giants rushed for 262 yards. The Packers put up 199 against the Patriots.
Hmm.
So, and that was between two guys. Well, I guess they counted the Christian Watson run as a run, so he added in 15 yards.
15, yeah.
But it's still, that's a massive amount of yards between two running backs. So I'm not sure what you would do. Rodgers and his, if you want to call it ego, is not going to be okay with only throwing the ball 3 times in a game. And he's not going to be okay with only doing, or maybe even 5 times in a game. You know, so you're going to have to make a level playing field of even things out with pass and run. So I think a lot of it is how they're going to do the offensive line. I really have to say
Hmm.
that was the thing that's been hurting him a lot lately. I mean, I'm glad Bakhtiari's back. I'm glad Jenkins is back. Bach has actually been looking pretty good. I did read
Yeah.
that they were hoping to do 2 series with Bach and then put in Yash for a series and then do 2 series for Bakhtiari and one for Yash and just keep going with that rotation.
Yeah.
And he came in and said, "No, I'm playing the game. I feel good. I can do this." And he played 70 of 73 snaps.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
but then you look at the other side with Elton, and he's been kind of not good. I mean, he's held his own in the run game. He's been all right in the pass game, but he's not looking like that all pro that uh, we've been used to. So
Hmm.
I don't know if it needs to be something where they need to move him back inside. And I know we're going to talk about this here in a minute, but I think that's got a lot to do with the run game too, because when Aaron Jones can find the right gap, he can gash away and he cash away, but he's not the thumper. So when the run game doesn't seem like there, they move to Dylan to be the thumper to open up the gaps for Jones. So it's a big conundrum. It really is. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Hmm.
So, but I do think, especially with the travel and the jet lag and whatever that they could possibly have by going to London, you definitely have to establish the run game. There's no doubt about it.
Of course, yeah, and I think, especially just being an overseas game, I really want them to see them just kind of set that baseline physicality and like the comfortability, the theoretically low risk running is just running the ball. And of course, in this league, modern day league, you can't just abandon the running game unless you're the Giants from week 3. Sorry, the
Or
passing
if you're
game.
the Packers.
Yeah, you can't just abandon the passing game entirely. And I fully expect, now that Dobbs has kind of asserted himself already as the wide receiver 2 in this offense, which is amazing. I want to see that continued reliability from him and catching more touchdowns, of course. But I just want to see a bit more. I want to see continued success and consistency in this run game, and especially with, as we have here in the notes, Josh Myers and Dexter Lawrence, who's playing like lights out this season, arguably the best nose tackle in the league right now. I think that is one of the most key matchups of this game, right along the defensive interior. You know, the Giants' defense is admittedly pretty depleted from a lot of the mistakes that they've had with Gettleman, but they still have a few guys on that D line. Is kind of where the strength of these guys is. And I think if the Packers can assert themselves amongst this group that's maybe not the best in the league, but definitely not the worst, you know, it kind of gives me a lot of confidence and it gives those guys a lot of confidence. As you said, Jenkins, not the best pass blocker out at right tackle, but he's been really good moving guys and kind of getting out into space, bumping guys off their spot, you know, creating angles in the run game. Yeah, this is the area of the game to me, as always, that I feel is most important. And yeah, I just want to see them build success and build confidence because in this season, there's going to be moments where the receivers are not going to be getting open and you're going to need to rely on that run game because it's your best option. So I want to see them get that rolling early.
Yeah, and they always say the run game opens up the pass game. So, hopefully if they can establish the run, we can see some more downfield passes, get Watson open in the deep down the field, get Dobbs in a crosser, get Cobb in a comeback or Lazard or you know, get these guys involved a little bit deeper than a 5-yard route. And so we'll see. It's going to be interesting. It really is. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle the travel. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle a field they've never been on before. It, it really is. This is going to be, I know I've overused the word, but interesting. It's going to be
Yeah,
quite the game to have.
absolutely. Well, do you want to go into who the guy that you're watching for this game is?
Yeah, I've already kind of talked about him a little bit, and it's probably going to be Elton Jenkins, just because I know there's been a little bit of sound bites from LaFleur's pressers saying that, yeah, maybe we should start taking a look at Yash at right tackle. Well, you don't say that if you don't think that maybe that needs to be a change. Now, is it because they want to change out Newman, who, like I said, I know he's your guy, but Newman has just been a revolving door this year, so I don't know if that means they want to move Elton into guard to replace Newman because of that and move Yash over to right, or if it's because they've seen that Elton really hasn't looked great as a right tackle. Either way, they've got to shore it up. And now that that Yash isn't getting the playing time at left tackle, I think he's earned a spot to play. So if anything, try him at right and see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I we all know Elton can be a great player. He's proved it up until his knee injury. He's proved he can be an all-pro at almost any position. It just seems like coming back from the injury, he's not been able to settle in at right tackle. So maybe moving him back to a guard position will help him get his, confidence back and get him playing like he should. I don't think you move him back to left guard because I think Runyon's been holding his own out there. He's kind of like
Yeah,
been the unsung hero of the whole offensive line right now.
yeah, I totally agree.
So yeah, that I'd have to say Jenkins is probably going to be the guy that is going to have my eye.
Yeah, totally. And on the other side of the ball for me, I think Quay Walker is the guy I have my eyes on. Kind of like I said, these struggling linebackers, this especially in the past two games, a lot of really almost uncharacteristic stuff from Devondre Campbell, missing these reads, and Quay this past week just not playing very well at all. A lot of mental processing errors in the run fits and kind of just running into a whole lot of nothing. Hopefully, this is a week where he can bounce back. And you know who the target is. We know how the Giants want to score. The plan should be all in on the run game and stopping Saquon. And it was really cool to see Walker this past game get a lot more snaps blitzing the quarterback. which is what he's really, really good at. And I think we'll continue to kind of see that as the weeks go on through the season. But most of all, what's most important, his job, stopping the run, what he should be theoretically the best at. We know he's that physical thumping guy, and we know he has the speed and movement skills to scrape along the line and find those guys. It's just a matter of him mentally figuring it out, which admittedly, as a rookie linebacker, starting straight away, it's quite hard. Devin Lloyd is not the standard. You look at these guys in years past who have been touted as, the best linebacker prospects. And even Devin Bush, Patrick Queen, Kenneth Murray's only just started to kind of show up. And Devin White has probably been the best in recent memory of the very early drafted linebackers, save Micah Parsons, who's a physical freak. But even Devin White is like still not very good in coverage. He's that kind of aggressive, blitzing, run stopping kind of guy. And it's a hard position to learn. So I don't expect Walker to have it all figured out in week 5 or week 4 of his rookie season. But I just want to see continued improvement, better mental processing, and just playing solid, doing your job, stopping the run.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, he's not been great, but I don't think he's been trash either. But I
Definitely
don't
not.
think
Definitely not.
I think you're going to have that with anybody. I mean, we can go back to what we were talking about with Rashawn Gary. You know, people, myself included, were kind of picking apart that pick and, oh, well, we should have took this guy instead of that guy, and you're always going to have that with any draft pick. So I bet you I can't even remember that far back, and you probably weren't even alive back then. With the way my mind shot right now, I don't think I can remember what the talk was back then. But I'm sure there were people who were all upset that the Colts drafted Peyton Manning and should have took Ryan Leaf, and or the Chargers. Oh well, we don't need Leaf, we need Peyton. And so I mean, you're always going to have that kind of thing. I mean,
Of course.
it's just going to happen. So kids, he's still young. Give him time. Like I said, he's not been complete trash. He's just had some mental mistakes, and that'll
Yeah,
clean up over the course of the year.
exactly. And I have faith in this coaching staff as they did with Devondre Campbell. I think every single linebacker that's come through this door in the past 2 years has played so much better than years previous, especially under Mike Pettin, where it was just an aberration, as I'm sure we all know and we all traumatized by. Um,
Well, and
and
Barry has always had the notion of being, or has the title of being a linebacker coach.
well,
You
exactly,
know,
exactly.
everywhere he's went, he's had great linebacker play. So you
Yes,
know,
exactly,
it'll take time, but I think he'll be something.
for sure. And the last thing I want to go over is Joe's over and unders for the week. So we're picking 3 of Joe's personal, hand curated over and unders for this week. Joe, you want to take it away?
Yep, these are just going to be some over unders of what possibly we think will happen in the game. Um, so the first one is going to be over under Giants rushing for 115 yards. What do you think?
It's really tough. I think, as I said, I don't think that Saquon is necessarily going to crack over 100. Probably get 99. But I think the combined sum of the Giants, at this stage, logically, I have to go over.
I'd love to say under, but if I had just picked Saquon rushing for 115 yards, I'd probably take the under. But I think a combined effort, it's going to hit the over. I'm
Yep.
going to go over on rushing for 115.
That's where I'm at too. Yep.
So the next one I got is I'm going to do over under 1.5 touchdowns for Dobbs. Uh, you know, so far he's had at least one touchdown
Mm-hmm.
in what is it in each. Well, he's got 2 touchdowns and he's had one touchdown in the last 2 games.
Yep.
I think I'm thinking that right. Um, so you know will this be the game that we're going to get multiple touchdowns? So, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I'm. This is a really really difficult one. This is one of my favorites that you put down here. I with my heart, I want to say yes. I think he has all the potential in the world to definitely crack that. And this team, the secondary is really not too hot. You know, you have like Adoree Jackson is one of your starting corners who I think a lot of people probably didn't realize was still in the league. Their safeties aren't super strong. I think it's definitely possible. I don't. It's such a tough one because it really is just one of those things that the way that the weather turns. But you know what? Why not? We'll say yes. We'll go over. We'll go over.
All right, well then I'm going to go against you. I'm going to say under. I'm going to say that he's going to
Oof.
keep the streak of one going. I think Aaron Jones is going to get in there with maybe one or two, combined rushing, receiving. I think he's Bobby touchdowns is going to get another one. Um, I think
Yeah.
I think the ball's going to get spread around, but I think Dobbs is definitely going to get at least one. So I think I'm just going to go. He's going to get one.
Yep. That's totally fair. And what's your
Uh,
last one?
well, I'm going to cheat. We got a little bit of extra time, and I got two left on here, so I'm going to go with the over under for Packers rushing yards. I set that at 125.
Yep.
Uh, being that last week that they combined, they rushed for 199. They've kind of been kind of on a roll with the rushing yards lately. So I set it 125 combined for Packers rushing.
I got to go over. I got to go over. I think if it's not just Aaron Jones alone, he gets over that, or Aaron Jones and a little bit of AJ Dillon over that. I think if we'll see more out of Christian Watson if he plays again, or even Romeo Dobbs if he plays again. I think that's one of the ones that, if that is the real line, I actually feel pretty good about going over that as a rushing total.
I probably should have set it a little bit higher because I never thought about the Christian Watson and the Romeo Dobbs possible end arounds. But yeah, I think I'll go over with that one too. Uh, the Giants team's not great, even though they are 3-1. Uh, they do have Dexter Lawrence up the middle, but I think the Packers will get cute with some of their end arounds and their touch passes and stuff like that. So I think there is a shot that they will. It may not be too much over 125. It might be something like 150, 160, but even that's a good game because I think they really want to get the passing game going. But I'm going to go over for that. So that leads me to the final one that I've got wrote down here, and that's over under 21 and a half points. And I said it like that because the Packers haven't had a lot of scoring. What's the word for it? Scoregasm games. Um, so I set it at 21 and a half for the Packers total.
I got to say over. I really feel over. I think last week, the second half of the game, something kind of clicked for this offense, and obviously, far from a perfect game from these guys, but we kind of see starting to take more advantage of the one-on-one matchups that they've been getting with these rookies, and everyone has been commenting. Rogers himself has said that, watching the film back, he's realized just how open Christian Watson has been and just how open Romeo Dobbs has been, and he's just kind of not throwing to them as much as he probably should be. And I think, now that he now that him and the coaching staff is probably more aware of that as the weeks go on, I just think that the potential for this offense just gets higher and higher, and I have a tough time seeing them being held under 4 touchdowns. I think maybe 3 in a field goal. I think that's probably my official prediction, but I definitely feel good about them going over 21 and a half.
I wish you could actually score a half point in the NFL
God.
because I feel like I would say push and have it be 21 and a half. I just nothing's shown me so far this year that the Packers are more than a half a game type team. I'm hoping this will be their breakout game where they're going to play at least three full complete quarters and have then they can take the fourth quarter off after scoring 50 points in the first three quarters. But I, I being as I said it at 21 and a half, I'd have to say over and just slightly, maybe go 24 points, 27 points, something like that. Uh, so I'm gonna go over with it, but not by much. Because, like I said, like we saw with the Patriots game, they play down to teams too much, and beings that the Giants aren't really, eh, their record doesn't speak for how they actually are right now. I I have a feeling the Packers are going to play down to them. They're going to have too many mistakes. They're going to score points, but it's not going to be enough to, like I use the term scoregasm. It's not going to be a scoregasm. Um, who would have thought in one podcast you would hear the term scoregasm thrown around so much? Um, so I would say it's over, but just barely.
Yeah, yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Um, and so yeah, that's everything on the show today, guys. Yeah, this this team is not they're still going through these growing pains, getting these rookies into the fold. But I think we're seeing a lot of really promising stuff from them. I don't think like they have the struggles with the defense and there's some of those pains with the offense, but I still have a lot of faith in this coaching staff to adapt and continue to improve as the season goes on. And I think everyone knew that this was going to be a tougher season, perhaps not what we were used to under Matt LaFleur previously. And I think sitting at 3-1 to start the season, I think is a really good place to be in. And if you look at their opponents coming up, we have a really good opportunity to kind of start like a nice winning streak and kind of solidify ourselves and build a nice kind of head start in the NFC standings. So I'm really excited to see how this game goes and the weeks following. But what do you say, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of games left to play, so it's going to be interesting to see how all of it plays out. How if some of these teams are going to continue their hot start, or if they're going to flounder. And same for the Packers. Are they going to pick up pace? Are they going to slow down? I do agree that we all knew it was going to be a completely different team because they didn't, Rodgers didn't have his normal, he didn't have his safety blanket in Devontae anymore, which, kind of maybe we'll talk about next week, depending on how that game turns out. I don't think it's working out too well for Devontae where he wanted to go. He's not seeming too happy over in Las Vegas, but
Yeah.
I it's going to be interesting. I know I keep overusing that term, but this season, I have to say, this season has been the most interesting season that I've seen in a long time, just
Yeah.
because of all the parody that's going on right now. So it's gonna be quite the year.
Yeah, for sure. That's all from us, guys. Tune in next week to see how our prop bets go and if the Packers claim victory over the New York Saquon Barkleys in London. Find us on Twitter at NicholasGRGR and at Iowa_Joe86. Until next time, see you later, guys.